Hi guys, I'm Connell, her art director for Davines, and I'm back again on Tuesday evening. I'm going to be here every Tuesday evening, same time, 8 PM Palmer, 7 PM UK. We're going to be doing a series of different haircutting tutorials, but each of the haircutting tutorials I want to deliver something that can be directly taken back to the salon and used on our clients, because I think not only are we going to be excited to do something different when we arrive back at our salon, which is hopefully sooner rather than later, I think the clients are going to want something really different as well. So my aim with this is to create just to show some tips, some tricks. You may use 50% of the haircut on one of your clients, you may use it all. You may think, okay, just a fringe idea I like, it's just the side, the way that he approached the back. But if anyone can just take one little bit away from all of these haircuts, then that's what the aim is. So I'm going to, before I start really explaining the haircut, I'm just going to let everyone come through because I can just see people are starting to join the live. And what I will do with the questions, the same as last week, if as I see them coming up onto the screen, I will answer the questions if I see them. If I miss any, because they're coming through a little bit too fast, then I'll make sure I go through the comment section a little bit later on tonight when I post the final image of the haircut, and I'll make sure I get back to everyone and answer any questions that are urgent. So, tonight I was going to cut a graduated bob, but I was sitting in the garden today and I've been thinking, well, fortunately I'm self-isolating at home with my family, which I'm sure most of you guys are. And I've been thinking a lot. Unfortunately, we've had some great weather, which has made everything a little bit easier. But I was sitting in the garden and I was thinking about doing this graduated bob that I planned to do. And I was like, I don't really want to start blow drying, and I felt like last week's live was maybe a little bit long. I didn't want to start to wrap dry and do anything that's too, how can I say, too solid and too blow dried and too neat and too sharp. I feel like because it's nice weather, everything's a little bit more slow paced at the moment because we're all being forced to slow down. I wanted to do I'm enjoying haircuts that are dried a little bit more naturally, so that's what I'm going to do with this. And then I was thinking, okay, if I'm not going to do the graduated bob, what type of haircut am I going to do? And I've been reading this book at the moment. It's called Silver Skate 70s. It's by a photographer called Hugh Holland, and he spent some time in Los Angeles and San Francisco in the 70s during a drought, photographing skateboarders. And I'll just show in a little bit, if you can see the hair on the front of that. I mean, look how fantastic and cool that hairstyle is. So I've been going through the book, looking at all the guys' hairstyles, and there's some really, really cool work in there. You know, these kids were surfer guys that were basically skating illegally in abandoned swimming pools because all the swimming pools had been emptied because there was such a drought. So you had these guys that were cutting each other's hair. They weren't so much hippies, they were a little bit rougher than hippies. They were just these street kids, jeans, pumps, but they all had really cool haircuts, you know, very heavy fringes, really shattered, very bleached, very light hair. So I've been sitting at home looking at this book and I was thinking, okay, I'm going to create a collection based around the hair that's in this book. So I was thinking this afternoon, okay, how am I going to go about that? And this is the haircut that I'm going to do today on this live. I'm going to basically experiment about approaching the next collection, which is going to be based around this book. So what you guys are going to see is kind of the initial thought process and my initial step into developing a collection based on this Silver Skate 70s book. So what I've done, I'm just going to tilt the head forward. I've sectioned off a rectangular section all the way through. It's dropping just below the crown area, but I've added a triangle into the front to isolate a section where I'm going to cut a fringe. I'm going to cut quite a heavy fringe that is too long, because what I found is looking at the kids in the book, all the hair's too long. I don't know how any of them actually skated, because all the fringes are just a bit too long and a bit too here. Obviously that was the style at the moment at that time, but that's why I've isolated that triangular section. I'm going to make sure the fringe is a little bit too long. So, and I'll just show you how low I've gone at the back with that. So I'm going to start at the back, and it's going to be a very, very quick haircut that's going to be left to dry naturally. If I see any questions coming through, I'll answer them. But if I don't, I'll get back to them later. So I'm just using a little bit of the Day spray, the mist. I'm going to take a vertical section. Let me come in a little bit tighter so you guys can see it. I'm going to take a vertical section right down the middle of the centre back. And I'm going to pull it out square. And what I want to do is leave length at this time, but I want to remove weight. So I'm going to pick a length. I don't want to cut it too short, because on these blocks, if I cut it too short, it's going to sit here and it's going to jump out, and it's going to almost give me more width, and that's not what I want. I want the underneath to sit a little bit flatter. So I'm going to pull out to here. When I feel like I've got a good thing, I'm going to start cutting a square line. And then as I come just below where the occipital bone is, I'm going to start to bring it out. And then what I want to do is really flatten out the back, but keep the length through the ends. I'm going to take that length up afterwards, but I want to leave that so that I have some choices with it afterwards. So you'll see I'll go square. I'm not pulling it out up until I take the second part of the section, and then I start to pull it out. Okay. So I'm just working to the corner of the back section now. I can feel my guide underneath. As I take the second part of the section, I'm pulling it out. So you can see now that's sitting a little bit flatter and shaped into the head. Okay, I'm going to spin around and I'm going to repeat the same on this side. I'm going to do it from this angle because I always find it's better if you can see almost through the section. I feel like it's easy to understand the angle and the length that I'm taking with the razor if you can see through the section rather than looking at it. So you guys can probably see that guide, very faint in there. Pull that out. And we're going square. As I take the second section underneath, I'm going to start to pull out. I'm purposely going quite fast with this because one thing that, looking at all the skateboarding guys' hair in this book, it's all very, very disorganised, and it's you know, you can imagine a group of teenagers cutting each other's hair. It's not going to be so heavy on the hairdressing technique, so that's what I don't want to do. I can see that Travis has asked the question, is it being cut square at the back or is it being moving around the head? It's being cut square. So I'm going to cross check now, and the line is square all the way through. So as I'm working across this section of the back, I'm square, and then as I'm coming around the sides, I'm going to take one step, so I'll start to round off here, but then I'm going to stay at this corner and bring everything back to that, so that I start to increase some length through the sides. So I have my square line here. So I'm standing here and I'm standing parallel to the back, my centre of my chest square into here. Now if I wasn't doing this on a live, I'd step around here, I'd take one step and I'd work pulling it into the centre. But if I do that, people aren't going to see. So what I'm going to do is just twist the head a little bit. I'm going to take a section that's just going around the corner. I'm going to split the section. And I'm still following the same line of going square. And then the underneath section, I'm starting to pull out. So I'm connecting it. It's not a disconnected length, but it's going quite quickly, much longer. And you'll see now I'm pulling this back onto here, because what I don't want to do is start to eat into my baseline of my side too much. I'm going to go square, and then because I'm coming onto the sides, I'm going to pull out much quicker. So before, under here where I was taking it square for, probably maybe 2 or 3 inches, and then starting to come out, I'm only doing a couple of centimetres before I start to pull out, so that I'm still leaving myself this veil through the outline. And then I'm pulling back onto the previous section. And then very quickly pulling out so that I don't start to lose my length of the sides. You'll see I'm taking quite big sections because I really want to see that guide and see the shape coming through. So square, and then I start to pull out quite quickly. And you'll see that I let my fingers slide and remove the razor a little bit. I'm going to do this next section a little bit. So I'm pulling back onto the previous. So I'm going square. And then how I leave more length is I go slide my fingers, slide my fingers, slide my fingers, slide my fingers. So that I don't have the razor on all the time. I slide it. There's been a question come through. Square horizontally, you say square vertically, or more triangular going shorter to longer. More triangular going shorter to longer. So it goes square and then starts to increase in length coming out towards the side. So if I just spin around here and show so if you could see if it was all expanded, it'd be square and then it'd start to travel out. That was from Jason. In fact, what I will do is I'll cut these next few sections on profile so you can see that a little bit more. One thing I've done, I've used the oil, non-oil from Davines to prep the hair this afternoon. So I'm pulling out square and then I'm starting to increase the length quite quickly. So what I did was I coloured the hair this afternoon with View 4,45 and then I added some oil, non-oil, and left it to dry in the sun to prep. And then I've just given it a light spritz with the day before I started to cut. And that was so that as the haircut dries naturally, it has a real kind of, the hair kind of chunks together and it has a real tactileness to it. I didn't want it to just feel like dry, fluffy hair. I want it to really clunk together because a lot of the guys' hair in this, I imagine it was hot and they were sweating, the guys in this skateboarder book. A lot of the hair is quite chunky and quite ropey in the pictures, so that was the reason for using that product. For anyone that's just come in, I'm just going to do a little recap for anyone that doesn't know what we're talking about. So, what I was going to do for this haircut was do a graduated bob, and then this afternoon I decided that I wanted to do a haircut out of this book, which is called Silver Skate 70s. It's by a photographer called Hugh Holland, and he basically documented the skating scene in the 70s in California. And there was a drought on at the time, so there was a lot of swimming pools that were empty, so this skate scene of these surfers exploded there, and he documented it in these beautiful monochrome portraits. Someone bought me the book, and I've been reading it because, as we all have lots of time at the moment, and because I've been reading it, the hair in it is so nice and so different that I'm going to create a collection based around the book. So this haircut that we're seeing today is my first step into creating that collection. So I'm going to go into this side. I just wanted to recap that for anyone that's just joined who missed the initial bit. So pulling that out, we're going square. Let me just clean my section. And then we're starting to increase length through the side. Just felt that up. If I'm missing any questions, guys, I will go through at the end and make sure that I answer them all in the comment section. So, as I get through to the side, just pull it back onto its previous square, and then start to pull it out. come in profile here. It's the head square to here, so you can really see the angle. So, over directing back onto the previous square, and then because we're into the side length now, increasing the length quite quickly. Back onto the previous, and you can see, because I've thought about the shape I want to create, and I want this haircut to be really, really dishevelled and really broken, and you know, these guys in this book were cutting each other's hair. It wasn't. It was a scene that was kind of very free and easy. They wouldn't have been going for, you know, 1 hour Vidal Sassoon haircuts. So it's important that I don't start to be too hairdressery about it and start to impose my sectioning and my ideas too much, because then it's going to look like a very styled. It's going to look like a very styled, groomed haircut, and that's not what we want it to look like in the end. It wouldn't have so much relevance if it did that. Square, and then I'm going to start to bring it out. And then I'm just getting to the front hairline section. Each section is being pulled back onto its previous, so that I'm increasing a little bit of length. And then I'm going to start to pull out. Okay, so now what I have, if I just spin around slightly, I have this flatness in the back, I have a flatness in the side, and then I have all these like long wispy lengths. I want to make a bit of a decision on the lengths before going on to the fringe and releasing the top. So, what's quite a nice part of this process is that this is the very beginning of me developing ideas from this book. So this is always my favourite part. You know, when you've developed the ideas and you've done the photo shoot, it's fun to recreate them, but nothing's more exciting than when you first found your inspiration point and you feel like there's enough to go at in it that you can create a collection, and you're just working on stuff and developing it in your heads in that mind frame. And I think because it was sunny in the back garden today and I've been reading this book, it's all come together, and I'm going to. This is something I'm definitely a channel I'm going to be going down for the next year. So, you can see I've got the tendrils here. One thing that I've noticed about a lot of the guys in the book, while the hair is very dishevelled, it always has a very like blunt, abrupt finish to it. So that's what I'm going to do. But I don't want to, again, do it too neat. So what I'm going to do is cut it quite freehand. I can just comb, get everything off the skin. So I'm just going to comb all of this length through here, and I'm literally just going to comb it, cut it freehand with the scissors, no comb, so that there's a very, very like chopped blunt thing. Because I'm imagining if these guys are cutting their own hair, they're not using a wire part comb and combing it into place. They're literally saying to their friend, "Get hold of my hair and cut it," and that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to look at the front of the book, because this guy's hair is kind of like shoulder, just above shoulder, so I'm going to do something based on that, I think. So the model's, this mannequin's shoulder hair would be about here, I think. So I'm going to go through and cut a very rough line around there. Okay, coming through this side. I'm going to follow around through here. I'm cutting the ends of the fringe, but it's going to be coming off into a fringe, but I just want to follow the line round. I don't want to stop just because I'm going to take this shorter anyway. And let's come through the back. So I'm just combing it a little bit neater so that I make sure I'm not missing anything. And I'm basically using the bottom of the mannequin head as a rough guide. So you can see if I spin around to the back now, it's flat in here, but there's just a bit of a there's a little bit more of an abrupt, a little bit more weightiness through here, so I really like this. It's flat and then goes in. So I'm going to cut the fringe before I release the top, because I still want to I want the fringe to be quite separate as well, so I don't want to release the top, it's all going to blend in, and then I think it's nice to just get like quite a definite fringing. As I was saying at the beginning of the live, a lot of the fringes in this book are they're too long, really. I don't know why they all have the fringes that long, but they look cool, so that's what I'm going to do. And you'll notice that I've taken the section only to the centre of the eye. You can see on the mannequin head, I'll just tilt it forward in a second. So as you just tilt forward, I've just taken quite a shallow fringe section. Because what I was looking at a lot of pictures of the actress Jane Birkin, and while her fringe looked so cool, was that it was only cut to the centre of the eye, but it was like the middle of the pupil, and so all these long hairs kind of fell over the top of it, and it makes for quite a cute fringe. So that's what I'm going to do here, because it's still, I'm using these guys in the skating book as a reference, but I still want it to be quite pretty and still have like a feminine feel to it as well. So I'm going to come here. As I said, I'm going to cut it too long, so I'm aiming for like the bridge of the nose. I'm not going all the way up the hair because I do want it to have quite a heavy line. Make sure my razor's straight. Just going to collect that hair again. So now we have this little fringe that's too long, which is quite nice. And what's nice about it is when they use the razor and you leave something with that little bit more length, this is all going to start to dry and kick in nice places. And then when you bring the rest of this in, you can see that it has that difference now. And I do think haircuts like this, it's all just that little detail. I could have taken the fringe out to here, but then it becomes quite a normal bob. Someone's asked a question: how would you adjust if your clients have curl licks in the fringe area? Would you change your sectioning? What I would do, if it all comes down to, if a client had jumps at the front of the hair, I'd do one or two things. First thing I would do is find out what her routine is in the morning. Is she someone that needs to be out of the house at 6 AM, she has a job that requires her to have no time to do her hair? Then I'd probably talk her out of a fringe, or maybe a side fringe that the flicks wouldn't affect. If she was somebody that could manage her hair really well, maybe comes into the salon for blow dries, then what I would do is just take, on the side where the flick was, I would just take the section a little bit deeper and a little bit heavier, just to make sure where the jump is, it has a little bit more weight, it presses a little bit heavier on there, and a little bit lighter where it doesn't. So in the hope that these two things, that the side with the jump sits flatter and the light side kind of connects into it. So that's what I'll do. But as much about what the hair's like, the questions will be about what the lifestyle's like as well. Do we have to say the same, but be androgynous, can work on men or women? Yeah, I think that's right. I think this haircut, most of the reference in the book that I was talking about are guys in there. So this could be a guy's haircut, could be a girl's haircut, could be whoever's, I think. So I've left this top. Now, first thing I'm going to do is check the length into the bottom. So I'm going to spin around and I'm going to cut it exactly the same way that I did before. So I'm going to comb it into place. All the way around, trying to not be too neat and not be too groomed with the cutting. And I'm going to cut it. There's a little bit that was just flicking. looking at that. So it's quite nice to cut like this, quite free. You don't have to be too sharp or too precise. But I think you only can cut like this when if you've spent years being precise and being sharp. Okay. So we have this section here that's a little bit too disconnected now. So I'm going to go through with the razor, and I'm not going to connect it, but I'm going to start to add it into the shape. I'm just going to spin around so to look from a distance at what everything's doing. Great. Okay. So we're going to come back around into here. So I'm going to take a vertical section again through this side. You can see that underneath is dropping away, which is great, that's what I want. And I'm going to make sure that the shortest section on the top is longer than the shorter section underneath, so that it all sits nice and flat. I'm going to show that again in profile. So you can see my shorter section's dropping away. My longer section is longer than the shorter one. And I'm just cutting from short to long, just starting, as soon as I start to touch with the razor, I'm starting to move my hands out. Doing the same cut with the scissors, what type of technique would you use? I suppose if I was doing the same cut with the scissors, the type of technique I would have to use would either start from the top of the head and use the points of the scissors and really scoop it out that way, or use the scissors as a razor, kind of use the exact same section that I'm doing, but then slide down more of a channel cut. Okay, I'm not going to cut this front bit because I'm going to do something else with that, just right at the very end. So I'm going to work back around the head, I'm going to spin it around. I'm going to start to work through this quite quickly. Underneath has fell away. Still going to bring my guide from the previous section. Okay. So, like I said, I'm blending, but I'm not connecting. I still want this to be a veil sitting over the top. So I'll bring around so you can see. And I'm literally working in segments around the head. I'm not over directing or anything. Drop that out as I can feel the guide from the previous one. I just add that in. And you'll see that I'm combing the hair as naturally as I possibly can, because this top section, I'm not blow drying, I'm not going to groom it at all. So the hair really has to be as it naturally wants to fall. And the only rule with this top, there isn't many rules with this haircut. The only rule is that I would say that the shorter piece of the top section needs to be longer than the shorter piece of the underneath section, because otherwise it's going to jump up and then it's going to have maybe a little bit more of a mullety type feel, which that's not really what I'm going for. It'd make it a very different haircut. So I'm going to pull this out again. And this front section, I'm not going to bring into this at this time, because I'm going to do something different with that right at the end. I'm just going to go and finish this corner. So as I said at the beginning, it is quite a quick haircut because I'm purposely trying to not be too neat. I'm purposely trying to not be too much like a hairdresser when I'm cutting it, because the guys in the skater book that I was referencing, they wouldn't have had a hairdresser cutting their hair. They were all doing it themselves, or it wouldn't have been necessarily someone that would have been spending so long on the sectioning. Right, so I'm quite liking. Are we over directing backwards around the top? No, I'm literally working in segments all the time. The only thing I'm doing is using the guide from the previous section, but I'm not over directing as I'm connecting the top. Right, something that I want to do now is I'm going to add a little bit of this texturizing serum so that I can start to see the hair kind of clump together before I make the final decision on the front. So I'm going to ask the client to tip the head upside down. I'll apply this product. Just want to say as well at this point, I'm using one of the snap caps from Pivot Point. Having this education now that whenever possible we're going to be using these, because last week was my first week of using them, and I love the fact that I've not got tons and tons of foam and plastic heads wasted around my house, because the actual scalp, for anyone that hasn't used them, the actual scalp of the hair, you can unscrew underneath the block, take the scalp off with the hair, and replace it with the next one. So tomorrow I'll put a blonde one on there, but the face and the head and the base stays. And I think as far as wastage from a sustainability point of view, it's a no-brainer really. And the standard of hair in them is great. It's actually, I prefer it to the other blocks because there's less hair in it, and I think sometimes with mannequin heads there's too much hair and you've got to spend half of your time kind of thinning and slicing rather than doing your haircut. So I'm going to just spin around so I can really see this now. I'm really liking this. So you can see when I was mentioning about the fringe being too long before, that's why. So we have room for all these little things. And there's one more thing that I want to do. I'm just going to show you. You can see how you can see how flat the back sits now because of that square layer through here. This sits quite flat over it, as do these sides through here. So the only bit of the haircut that I haven't cut at this time is these front little tendrils, and that's because I want to put a little step in there. Because this I like, it needs something else in there. And I noticed some of the guys in the books, they kind of have this like feathery thing around the front, as was the style back then. So I'm going to add, I'm not really going to feather it, but I'm going to add a real step. So you'll see I've just wet the hair, and I'm just teasing it with my hand to see where it wants to wave. And now I can see where it wants to wave. I'm just going to cut quite freehand in there. So she just has a little kick right on the cheek, and it sits really, really disconnected from this. So you have this base here, this little kick, and then this fringe, which is kind of like 3 steps. And then I'm going to do the same with the other side. And I'm literally going to let the hair direct me. It might be symmetrical, it might be not, but it's going to be wherever the hair wants to wave. Because I think it only kicked like that because I let the hair guide me to where it is. I didn't section it off and pull it really neat and then decide where the length was going to be. I let where the hair wanted to wave dictate where the hair was cut, and that's why it kicks. So you can see I'm just teasing it into here. There we go. So I'm going to spin it around slightly so I can have a final little look. I'm going to add a little bit more of the texturizing serum, which if any of you haven't used this, it just, as soon as you put it on, the hair just clumps together. So if you want real thick, chunky texture in your finished look, this is the one. So, before I finish, points to remember: don't be too neat with it. Don't try and section off within an inch of its life. because then it'll start to look a little bit too uniformed, and that's not from the skater book that I'm using as a reference point. That's not how the hair was cut. Secondly, the fringe should be a little bit too long. You've noticed I cut it to the bridge of the nose, probably even a slightly bit longer with the razor, because I want to give it room to do all these little movements that it's doing now. And then the baseline was just cut freehand. I just combed it, I let it jump, I let it just curl, and then I cut it freehand around the edge. Because again, I just wanted that real abrupt finish, that maybe there's things that are a little bit too long, maybe there's things that are a little bit too short, but it'll have that more organic feel that this haircut, these haircuts in this skating book that I'm using as my reference has. What I will do in the comment section, I will go through and post a few of my favourite pictures from that book, just so you can see where my head was at with it. And then just going to spin around for one final look. I'm going to use this, my favourite comb, Japanese comb, and it's nice because none of the hair sticks to it. You can just comb it straight through. It has very, very wide teeth. So what I'm doing is just having a play with these, let these stick from. Okay, so that's my shape. What I'm going to do now, I'm going to go and put her outside in the garden, just going to let her dry for an hour, and then about an hour and a half, I'll post some finished pictures on the feed in the comment section, and I'll also post some images of my favourite looks from this book, because it maybe gives some of you guys some ideas. But the reason I wanted to share this was two reasons. One, this is where my work's going to be going this year, for the rest of the year. I'm going to be using this as a reference point, colour and cut. And secondly, I think while it's strong and it's a little bit more conceptual, there's still techniques in here that could be transferable into the salon, and that's for all the work that I'm going to do in these tutorial sessions every Tuesday night. That's what I want to do. I want to make sure that there is some stuff in everything that we do that we can take back and introduce to the clients when we're all back up and running. So I'll see you all next Tuesday, same time on Davines Education channels. Thank you very much. Stay cool, keep out of trouble, and I'll see everyone next week.